BC said they had about 20 registers. There was a green book, a yellow book, a black book. So one wonders, what is KPMG going to audit? Are they going to audit a green book?
Yes, and that brings me to my next question.
Yes.
KPMG being picked to audit the voter register, and of course, Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi have said they don't have experience in auditing election material or voter registers. Is this a recipe for chaos as we get into 2017?
I think just before Dismus picks up, in my view, I think the IBC and the persons behind the spin doctors are not sensitive and responsive to the Kenyans' demands. When the Kenyans enacted the new constitution, they put in place laws that will bring it forth what Dismus is calling a predictable system. And one of the predictable systems is that there shall be a certainty of the registers. And that was a big issue in the Supreme Court. Which register and how many registers do we have? Even as we go today, there is a high question and high dispute of how many registers are there. So when the KMP is called what? KPMG comes and purports to be auditing the register, how are they auditing the register? Which regions are they auditing? Could they be auditing some regions, removing some and adding others? What was difficult with them telling Kenyans we'll have a massive new voters registration for a period of 2 months, and Kenyans would have registered. For the last 4 years, IBC has been knowing that we have been having disputes with the voters register. And they have not taken any initiative to even call Kenyans and say, we are disregarding this register that we went with for 2013, and we register afresh. Because registering afresh will give much more certainty than just mere audit.
So you think auditing would not help matters
Auditing will not cure the problem that we are in today.
Dismus, do you think
it's a recipe for chaos.
Well, you know, when you look at KPMG, majority of fresh graduates from all our universities would like to join KPMG because the people who work there are top accountants and top auditors. And what Raila said yesterday is actually reckless. That's attempting to drag the reputation of KPMG through the mud. The fact that KPMG has not done a similar assignment in Kenya does not mean that they don't have the expertise, because KPMG is global. They probably have practices in Ghana, Nigeria, where they can get some expertise. And in any event, even if there's no expertise, those guys are very sharp. They can sit down and agree that we want to clean the register. What are we supposed to be doing? So the fact that KPMG has been given the contract and they don't have experience is not a sufficient reason for us to say they'll not be able to do this job. I think the reason why Raila is crying and Musalia Mudavadi is they do not know the terms of reference, that this thing needs to be very, very transparent. So for me, that KPMG or PwC, whoever is going to be given the assignments, is actually a secondary issue. The primary issue is what are the terms of reference? And wherever they're going to be doing this work, is there going to be some sort of quality control that all the stakeholders are able to see what KPMG is doing? And you know, that was discussed in the legislation passed by the Joint Committee. They said that a stakeholder, a committee made up of all the relevant stakeholders would have the opportunity to do this. So which begs the question, why is IBC in a hurry to do this thing in a manner which seems to be like, it's like a mystery? I don't know whether they're applying the Official Secrets Act, that they don't want outsiders to know what is happening, knowing very well this is an issue of life and death. And
could that be the reason why Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi are crying foul, that there's no concrete transparency in this particular process?
Yes. But again, when you go back to the reputation of KPMG, when you look at their Kenyan practice, probably doesn't appear anywhere in the global pie chart that they've got a presence in Kenya. So I doubt whether they would allow their reputation to be dragged through the mud because of this auditing process. And there's no doubt in my mind that they'll be able to do a very good job. But now, the big question is, who is setting the parameters for KPMG? Because for them, they can do an assignment. They say, this is what we are told by IBC, and we've done our BS. But are all the other stakeholders going to be happy with it? So I think it's important for IBC, but still the buck stops with the president, to ensure that this thing is so free and fair. The process of cleaning that register is so solid there nobody wants to doubt it. And I think this serves President Kenyatta's interest, because when you look at the Jubilee propaganda, they're saying next year's election they're going to win by 70+1. So where can they win 70+1 when the register is so clean, so that Raila, Musalia, Kalonzo, Wetangula have no reason to start complaining?
All right, and just to finish on that particular story and take a look at, we have overstayed on that, of course, and that is a story that has taken center stage on the Standard newspaper. And of course, that's only the Standard. We'll get into the Daily Nation in a bit. I just want us to quickly jump to the 6th page, where defections and court battles and violence rock Jubilee elections. Quickly, let's just talk about this for a bit. We've just run a story here of nominated Senator Paul Njoroge from Nakuru defecting to KANU, complaining that this particular elections of interim officials were very chaotic. And he's not the only one. There was someone also in Embu, who also defected, but he's not said where he's going to. And we've seen chaos. We've seen chaos in Nyeri, here in Nairobi. We have seen other areas in the country. What do you think? What do you think? Did the dream for Jubilee Party, was it just on paper? What do you think exactly?
You know, when you look at
I'm trying to get the right words to frame the question. But
yeah, I saw Raphael Tuju yesterday addressing a media conference. And of course, he put a very good spin to this. He said for him, what he sees is a passion for Jubilee, that people are excited and they're happy that there was no violence. And when you look at the raw footage, you actually see the supporters throwing seats all over.
And we've been showing the stories in the media every day.
So it's only Raphael Tuju who doesn't see that there's a bit of violence. And I think when you look at the reporting of the Jubilee nominations or these elections versus ODM, I think the media in Kenya generally is very lenient on Jubilee. Because had it been ODM, then it would have been violence rocks. You know, it would have been more. It would have gotten a very serious description.
But the violence has been taking center stage and prominence in the news bulletins. I'm speaking for KTN News. Speaking for KTN.
No, but over here, you know, it's reported that it's just chaos. And if you go to the definition of chaos, then it doesn't capture the violence. Because when you see one delegate throwing a metallic seat at another delegate, that's the definition of violence. A woman was
badly injured in Samburu as well.
And you know, there was blood. And that was a lady, and then you saw the poor... Our colleagues were trying to put some bandage. You really, that's violence. But the contradiction here is that the Jubilee supporters actually do not understand their own constitution. Because there's a general assumption that if you're going to be a county official, you will influence the outcome of these elections, which is really erroneous. That only used to happen during the KANU days, that if you're the branch chairman, say, of Kisii, you've got a direct bearing on how the nominations are going to take place. The Jubilee Constitution is very clear that if you're going to be an official, they're going to discourage you from running from an elective seat. And in any event, there's going to be an electoral board constituted by Jubilee to preside over this election. So one really fails to understand why everybody is running all over helter-skelter, trying to outmaneuver each other.
But given how nominations are conducted in this country, don't they have legitimate reasons to be a worried lot, especially those that are aspiring for various positions in 2017?
No, they don't need to, because Jubilee, if the president kept his word, they've indicated the nominations.
Operative word.
They've indicated that the nominations are going to be conducted by IBC. So one would assume that IBC would be independent. And even if it's not done by IBC, it will be an entirely different body to do these nominations, not the elected officials today. That's why you saw a few of the guys who've gone through their constitution and understand this did not even bother to participate in this election, which goes back to our prior conversations, that these are just special purpose vehicles. There's no political party by the name Jubilee. What people are looking at is President Uhuru, and they're looking at the Deputy President Ruto. And you see most of this violence is being manifested in areas where the two come from, where it's very strong. So erroneously, Kenyans believe that if you become, say, the county chairman, then you've got an automatic ticket, which is not the case. But I'm hoping that the Inspector General of Police is actually going to take action. Because if you do not stop violence, you know, right now we are not even doing Jubilee nominations. It's just the
interim officials.
And there's that level of violence. So one would imagine that the Inspector General of Police is paying attention and punishing people for breaking any rules. Because if he doesn't do that, then people will say, we did our election for interim officials, there was violence, nothing happened. we did our party primaries, nothing happened.
So it would be a no.
Now, when we go to the general election, it's going to be a best practice.
What do you think?
In my view, maybe I have to differ slightly with him. Why you see the aspirants are so much interested in the way the party structure is organized at the grassroots is because mobilization for voters for purpose of party primaries will arise from the grassroots. And there is this notion, which is fallacious notion, that indeed that the party structures at the grassroots will facilitate and assist an aspirant to win the party primaries. Remember, the way Jubilee has been structured, it will be a matter of life and death.
It is.
Especially in the Jubilee strongholds. Like now in Kirinyaga County, where I come from, we have the current incumbent governor who is vying through Jubilee. We have, I would call her the defunct Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru. We have the aspiring candidate from Kirinyaga Central, and we have two more. All
Martha Karua as well.
Martha Karua is in Kenya, fortunately.
Yes.
She's guaranteed of a ticket.
She's guaranteed of a
Yes,
ticket.
she's guaranteed.
Now, we have 4 contestants, all of them very strong candidates, going for one political party. And all of them, they want to win.
And remember, we have the party hopping rules as well.
And we have the party hopping rules that they have no saving grace. It's either I get it or I don't get it.
So it's a matter of life and
So
death.
what they're going to do is they'll make sure that, in fact, on Thursday, I met one candidate from Embu. He's saying, I must win the Jubilee nomination. That's what he's saying, by all means. So what will happen is, and why they're interested in the party structure elections, is because these guys are the ones who are going to generate the register for nominations, for primaries. So they believe that they'll be able to perpetrate rigging at that level. And then you can see, if then they're not able to get one of their own to facilitate their nominations, then they cannot be satisfied with that process. But the biggest question is, if Jubilee is not able to deliver promising and credible party structures elections, how will they guarantee the credibility of their primaries? They are saying that we shall use IBC to help us deliver credible primaries. But is it the same IBC we are saying that it's not even ready for the national elections?
Yeah.
How are they going to prepare for the party primaries for Jubilee, for the whole country, if they have not prepared for the country? What is important to us? Is it the Jubilee party primaries, or is it preparation for the general elections? So I believe, and there is all reason to worry, that first of all, violence will erupt from the Jubilee strongholds. And that we witnessed 2 weeks ago when the president visited Kirinyaga County. The incumbent governor, Davi, was not allowed to speak. People, goons came, they booed him, they shouted him down, they dressed him down until he could not address the gathering. And yet he was the host. And who was bringing these guys? The competitors. In Jubilee are the ones who brought these goons. So what will happen is violence will erupt, first of all, when we are doing the nominations for the party primaries. And because the IBC is not guaranteeing credible elections, there may also be probability and high probability and chances of violence erupting again.
All right. Dismus, what do you think?
Well, for me, I think it's important for the president to be very firm with Jubilee, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with him. So it's really unacceptable for Raphael Tuju to wish it away and say that was an expression of passion in our electoral process. They need to be sure that they deliver the party primaries in a manner which is free and fair, and nip the violence in the bud. Because for the longest time, we've been told that this violence only takes place within the ODM electoral process, but now we've seen it in Jubilee. And what has been happening in all these counties, the president must actually take note. Like, for instance, it was unacceptable. Like, we see what happened in Meru when during Jamhuri Day celebrations, that a group, I understand, associated with Kreti Murungi, or people came dressed in Jubilee colors, disrupted the process. So moving forward, the president must reassure the nations that the party primaries are going to be free and fair for Jubilee. And the same is the case for NASA and CORD, that the party primaries must be free and fair. Because we cannot claim to have a democracy in Kenya if the party primaries are never free and fair, because those are really the fountains of party democracy. And part of the reason why we've got a mediocrity in the National Assembly is because solid guys who would like to go to the National Assembly or Senate are unable to participate in the party primaries because of the violent scene. Like, for instance, when you see a lady being beaten into a pulp, you know, there's blood all over her face.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to go to the National Assembly will ask the question twice, do I really want to undergo through this process? And if we had very bright chaps in the National Assembly, today we would not be worried whether or not the current IBC can actually preside over the general election and do party primaries. Because somebody like Duale or Kidure Kindiki would have created a body similar to IBC, but whose primary responsibility is only party primaries. So that you have an organization funded by maybe the taxpayer to look at party primaries, so that you leave Chiloba all alone to focus on the general election.
All right.
But because our National Assembly has been invaded by impunity and mediocrity, all these guys start imagining that, how is IBC going to manage the situation after the train has left the station?
May I mention something
quickly,
just before we leave this topic? You see what happened in Nakuru yesterday. There's this senator, nominated Senator Njoroge Ben, who has now defected to Kanu. And the reason for defecting to Kanu is saying that my party cannot be able to, and I understand he was very instrumental in bringing up the Jubilee party. He's saying this party cannot guarantee credible structures, party election structures. Then he's worried whether or not the same will be able to deliver credible primaries. And you see, this idea of Jubilee, that you must be in Jubilee for you to win the elections, is what used to be called the three-piece ideology, which was there previously. Now, the idea why people have to be bundled into this one bad wagon is to make sure that there is no any other competitor from those strongholds who will defeat the Jubilee. So they are simply telling us it will be a six-piece suit. And that is party corruption, actually election corruption and political corruption. Yes.
All right.
But
I would want us to move from this paper, but just make your point.
Yeah, but you know, Senator Njoroge should have seen this coming, because the last couple of months it's been a pain. He's been telling the Deputy President Ruto that do not take our votes for granted, that 2022 we are not going to vote for you. So you should have seen the crystal ball. And also for Anne Waiguru, who has been, you know, running around with the Deputy President. Even if she wins the party nominations for Kirinyaga, I doubt whether she's going to be given the ticket. Because again, Jubilee has got a provision that the fact that we won party primaries does not guarantee that you are going to be our candidates. That goes back to our political parties and their democracies, that these are special purpose vehicles.
Yeah.
So for Senator Njoroge, I think he should have defected a long time ago.
It was long overdue.
Yeah, and I suspect Gideon Mo is a very happy man.
All right, all right. And of course, those are some of the top stories we have on the Standard newspaper. Get yourself a copy, the very interesting stories in it. Let's now move to the next paper, the Daily Nation. And the top story here is how Uhuru and Ruto threw me under the bus. Kalonzo Musyoka reveals details of how he lost out in the 2013 Kibaki succession race in a new book that traces his political journey from the parched hinterlands of Kitui to within striking distance of the presidency. This is not the first time we are hearing someone say they were thrown under the bus. We have our very own Musalia Mudavadi, who has had a very bad experience with the same thing. What does this say exactly? This is not something new in politics, but what exactly does it say about our politics? Keeping in mind that Kalonzo Musyoka is also eyeing the presidency seat in a coalition where there's about 3 or 4 more people who are looking at the same seat and the same ticket.
Well, for me, I would say that this is the revelations actually confirms what Kenyans have had for a long time, fears we've had for a long time. That in fact, there's no democracy in Kenya. That when Wanjiku wakes up early in the morning to go and vote, they're largely doing this because of ethnic mobilization. When you go through the lamentations by Kalonzo Musyoka, he says he was hoping that then Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and Ruto were going to back him because they come from populist communities. And for the case of Ruto, Chebet was going to be told vote for Kalonzo and should have no option. And for the case for Uhuru Kenyatta, Wanjiku would be told vote for Kalonzo and they would have no option. Which begs the question, as Kalonzo built enough political capital that he can run on his own? Because for me, I would imagine if Kalonzo is really solid, as he has made us believe, The moment Uhuru and Ruto told him that we are not going to support you, and it's very curious, they say that they were at his residence in Karen. So I suspect he had just served them with mudokoi and a cup of tea, and they were enjoying his hospitality. And they told him, you're not going to be a presidential candidate, you're not going to be a running mate. Go for another position.
Pick another position.
Yeah. And which obviously he declined. Which means that Kenya is a nation. And if you are Wanjiko in Nyandarua, or maybe for your case in Kirinyaga, you need to ask yourself, why am I being held captive by these tribal lords? Because really at the end of the day, every single Kenyan has got some desires for upward mobility. That if you vote for, say, Musalia Mudavadi or Kalonzo Wetangula next year, at the end of 5 years, you need to see a very visible change in your socioeconomic lifestyle. That if you are a painter and you used to sell maybe one of your paintings for 10,000, they've created a nice environment for you to be able to sell it for 20,000. The fact that I'm, say, a Kisii man, and a gentleman from Kisii wants to become president, and I go vote for them, and they're not going to transform my lifestyle, I think it's really, it's a mockery of democracy. And lately, on the issues of corruption, we just discovered that even if you come from Ishaweri in Gatundu, and you're not part of the bracket called family and friends, you're not going to be a beneficiary of President Kenyatta's administration. You recall that the Auditor General revealed a few days ago that the president's own sister and friends are being described as marginalized, and they're getting these very interesting government contracts. And really, at the end of the day, as Kenyans, when we are going to vote, we need to ask ourselves, if I vote for, say, Raila Odinga, am I voting for Raila Odinga because I'm a low man, or because Raila Odinga has got a good track record when he takes office, is going to serve and be sensitive to my selfish interest? And that's what this story about Kalonzo tells us. That for him, he's seated pretty at his, leave his home in Karen, and hoping that Ruto and Uhuru, who had spent a lot of resources going through the country doing very serious campaigns, they were just going to endorse him because he had a deal with Kibaki, or because, he does a bit of a pedicure or manicure. They say, okay, I run with this position. I think for politicians in Kenya, you must go to the trenches. And at this stage,
you have to get your hands dirty.
Yeah, and I think at this stage, we need to give President Kenyatta a pat on the back. Because a few days ago, he said, let the election next year be about your development record, on your track record of success, so that we stop looking at people from tribal lanes that are, okay, all of us are from Machakos now, it's time for Kalonzo to run office. Because it's very clear, if you're not part of family and friends, for the next 5 years, you're going to be wallowing in misery.
But Ndegwa, do you think Kenyans will get to a point where we will have mature politics like what Dismus is talking about? Because as it is, our politics is very, very tribal and ethnic.
I think, in my view, that might be a tall order and an ambitious aspects to try and achieve. For one reason is that if you look at what Jubilee is doing, and this is clearly seen from the routes that they are doing. They were in Kitui the other day they were in
Western Kenya.
And the rhetorics in Western was, tumekuja kufungua ile factory watu walifunga. The other rhetoric was, wale watu wamekula pesa ya Mumias warudishe. So they are propagating the politics of poverty. That we are going to bring development issues here. In return, you are going to vote for us. But remember, this development strategy, to me, I call it politics of poverty. Jubilee, or even CORD, may not be interested in elevating the status of those individuals. They're interested in coming during the time of the elections to entice them, to support them. And this is clear from what is happening and from what the president said on 12th during the Jamhuri Day. He castigated the NGOs that are offering civic education. A person who is not civil and civically sound cannot be able to make an opinion outside the scope of his tribal cocoon. Yet the president, on a national day, when we expect him to address issues of the doctor strike, he tells us NGOs should be checked because they are giving civic education to Kenyans. Yet, under the new constitution, and under the County Government Act, is a mandate of the national government to allocate money to the county governments. In return, the county government is supposed to operationalize civic education to the Mwananchi and Wanjiko. So essentially what the NGOs are doing, They are coming to fill up the gaps where government has deliberately and by design refused to do. Because it's not easy for you to manipulate a person who is well endowed with information. And Uhuru Kenyatta's government is perpetrating the Napoleon ideology. When Napoleon was the emperor, what he did, he made sure that students were not taught social sciences. They were only taught chemistry, physics, biology, and autopilot physics and all those. Why? He avoided teaching them civic courses and social sciences, because social sciences have the ability to revolutionize the mind and ideology of the community and the philosophy of the community. So if Kenya will ever move from where we are today, it will depend with the incumbent. Because there's no way the incumbent can castigate the NGOs when they're trying to give civic education that is going to help us to start voting on issues. And then they tell us to leave the tribal aspects. And again, Jubilee can never and CORD can never invest in voting for ideology and issues, because they eat from the pie of tribe.
All right, all right. Let's just get away from that for a bit and get to page 3 of the Saturday Nation. This is a story that has gotten Kenyans very angry, especially on the social media. There's been a lot of comments on the same. For second state, a Kenyan dies in Addis Ababa. It's a story of a young IT consultant who was killed in Ethiopia about 20 months ago. His body has remained there for about 20 months. Just came back the other day, the body. And we understand there's a friend who was arrested together with him on the very day, a day or two after they landed in Ethiopia. And he's still in the prisons. And we still have another story of Kenyans arrested in South Sudan. But what exactly does it say about our foreign policy and some of the work that's being done in the Foreign Affairs ministry? Because this is not the first time we're getting cases of Kenyans being arrested in foreign land, and most of the time the argument is they were just going there for jobs and they didn't do anything wrong in the foreign land. Dismus.
Maybe let's look at a best practice. If you get an American in any country who gets into trouble, the first person to issue a statement is the American president. Everything at the White House will come at the standstill, and President Obama would pay specific attention. The State Department under John Kerry will focus on this particular issue. The same happens in Israeli. And you know, during the altercation with the Palestinians, the Israelis say that you kill one of our own, we'll come for you. It matters not the cost of the resources you are going to deploy. So for Kenya, for Ambassador Amina Mohamed, who is the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs, to say that she's been a success in having international conferences coming to Kenya, having bilaterals or multilaterals coming to Kenya and creating business opportunities, it flies on the face of what has happened in Ethiopia. Because Ethiopia is just actually our neighbor across the road. And the principal duty of any president is to secure lives and properties of all Kenyans, wherever they are. When you go to the Department of Immigration and you are given a passport, that passport has got the President of the Republic of Kenya. If you look at, I think it's page 2, it requests all international authorities to render you free pathway. And it's the President who is asking that authorization for you. So that we are seated in Nairobi, and Ambassador Amina Mohamed is running all over Africa, wanting to be the next head of the Africa Union, while Kenyans are languishing in South Sudan jails or prisons. And the same is happening in Ethiopia. It's actually unacceptable. Because it should be the case that the priority for Amina Mohamed is Kenyans all working outside. And it's really, actually, it's a logic upside down for Amina Mohamed to tell us, I've been to Ethiopia, and Kenya signed a bilateral with Ethiopia, creating opportunities for Kenyan. Now go to Ethiopia, do business, and as soon as you land there, you are held captive, and you've not committed any mistake. If a Kenyan goes to Ethiopia or South Sudan or indeed any other country, and you commit a criminal offense and you are jailed, that must be respected, that you've broken the laws. But for the Kenyan situation, they seem to have done nothing, and they're rotting in prison. And Amina Mohamed and the deputy president and a number of cabinet ministers are jumping from all states in Africa wanting Amina Mohamed to become the next chairperson of Africa Union. That's really unacceptable. And what is even more disturbing, when people on social media criticize Amina Mohamed for this, and we've got a new constitution, or rather probably now it's become old, but the constitution gives us the freedom of speech. People who follow Amina Mohamed, wherever they criticize her, she takes the first opportunity to block them. And if we were in a very civil societies, people would have held demonstrations, go to the Ethiopian embassy in Nairobi and protest, go to the South Sudan embassy in Nairobi and protest, because really this is unacceptable.
That has happened. The protests have happened, but they've not been able to get as much people to go, because it's just the families and the friends, especially for the South Sudanese. They've done numerous protests. They've written letters to the president. They've written letters to the cabinet secretary for foreign affairs, Amina Mohamed, but there's just seemed to be mum on this particular issue.
Maybe before
let's just finish.
And it's not only limited to Ethiopia. And part of the reason why the Ethiopian story has come out to the fore is because it looks like it's a middle class that they're able to mobilize resources. There are so many poor women who went to the Middle East to serve as domestic workers, and majority coming from the coast. And you go there, the first thing I understand they do is they take your passport, and they start molesting you. You leave Kenya hoping that you are going to be a domestic worker, but you're converted into a prostitute, and there are pimps all over. And you've got a government back in Nairobi claiming that we've succeeded in economic diplomacy, we've got bilaterals, we've got multilaterals. And for me, I would imagine this is the kind of situation that demands the president's personal attention. But again, people in the streets say, the reason why Nairobi is not able to look at Addis and state the position in black and white is that the current administration is interested in business opportunities for top government officials. So that if you're a poor Wanjiko from Kinangop and you're held in Ethiopia, nobody is bothered.
Maybe to add on what you said, you remember we had what was called the shuttle diplomacy. Then after the shuttle diplomacy, we came to the hustlers jet. From the hustlers jet, then we came to Amina Mohamed's diplomacies. And all these diplomacies were geared towards getting off the hook few individuals who had few problems by then. We don't need to mention them, they all know them.
Personal problems.
Personal problems. But when we have a Kenyan of Zakayo's status, who is really no one, nobody bothers. Because Zakayo is really a non-factor, and he's not going to influence whether or not companies will be able to create deals with other companies across the border. So the thing here is we require a presidency and a government that is responsive to people's wishes, norms, and aspirations. And that government can only be constituted by the people themselves. Remember, the current administration, the Jubilee administration, is a beneficiary of Addis Ababa. It's in Addis Ababa where they made serious declarations, serious summits were held there when President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto were having problems in the ICC. So they may not then be seen to be cutting the herd that feeds them. The stability that they've been able to have for the last 3 years after the collapse of the ICC cases has been influenced by the Addis Ababa. So in real sense to them, Addis Ababa is a darling to them, and they have now chosen to see no evil, to hear no evil, and to speak no evil about Addis Ababa.
As Kenyans continue to suffer. All right, I understand we don't have too much time, so we'll get away from the Daily Nation and finish up with the Star newspaper. And the top story is just a discussion we were having minutes before we went on air with Dismus. Members of Parliament given 40 million Kenya shillings to dilute the NYS probe report. And that is a story that is taking center stage on the Star newspaper. Remember, we've seen the probe before the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee, of course, chaired by Dr. Nicholas Gumbo. Sometimes it has been very intense. We've seen very intense sessions, like when Anne Waiguru was before the committee, when Josephine Kafura was before the committee. The other day we had the law firm managing partner for Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, Hilary Sigei. But all of this committees in Parliament, all of these probes, and eventually if a report is given, it usually just put aside and dust is gathered onto the next probe. Is it really worth it?
Three things come to mind. Number one, what this committee by Gumbo is doing, they are shooting in the dark, and it's a waste of time. If you speak to people who understand the standing orders in the National Assembly, they say the only time you're supposed to have this kind of a hearing is when the Auditor General has presented a report. And then the report is given to this committee to go through the report. When experts, subject matter experts, have gone through this and given an opinion, it's only at that stage that you can summon Anne Waiguru or any other person to try and establish what has happened. But as it is now, they're just shooting in the dark. I don't think they're going to be able to achieve anything. So really, they're wasting time. But obviously, there is the motivation that they are going to be the sitting allowances. And as the headline suggests, that they've been given 40 million. Probably that's a drop of water in the sea. It said that wherever a committee of this magnitude is sitting, there's a lot of lobbying before the actual meeting. And you would see that when Anne Waiguru went for this hearing, when she got to the room, you would see everybody was intimidated. Nobody had the ability even to ask her a question. Even the chairman, Gumbo, was sweating all over, and nobody knew what was happening. And then number two, it expressed massive mediocrity and ignorance within that committee. These people are interrogating how the IFMI system works at the Treasury or in the payments at both national and county governments, but not one single MP knows how IFMIS works. So for Anne Waiguru, it took about 10 minutes to give them a quick seminar, a crash program, a workshop on how IFMIS works. So you begin to wonder, what were they actually investigating? And then number two, do those MPs have the capacity or the requisite intellectual infrastructure to understand these complicated things? You know, you could have an engineer there, you could have a shoe shiner, you'd have a farmer there, but do they understand these intricate things? Do they have the benefits of forensic experts who can take them through these processes? And the answer is no. So the reason why they love this, and Senator Murkomen, I saw him on another TV show saying that these people just go there because they're interested in really money. That's
why he's refused to appear before the Public Accounts Committee.
Yeah, because he knows that probably some khaki envelopes have been, been dished out to various people. So really, this committee by Gumbo is a waste of time. And it goes on to tell us that as a nation, people have lost faith in the National Assembly and in the ability to deliver anything. Because how can you have a lady by the name Kavura, who is said to be a suspect in this NYS, coming to that committee, and then with a lot of alacrity, she doesn't know the number of organizations that she runs. And then she says, I can only remember 20. And then she proceeds to reveal that she would be given those LPOs on a Sunday evening. And the officials from NYS would ask her, Madam Mukwe. And when she indicates she's in a particular restaurant, they drive there. She admits that she can actually go to a bank and carry money in sacks. And she walks out of the National Assembly. First of all, she's offered a cup of tea with security, and she walks out of the National Assembly. And then Ben Gedhi, during the same hearings, comes, and she cannot remember which primary school she attended. She cannot remember the high school that she attended. She can't even remember business partners. And then what happens? The committee breaks into a dance and song, says, you've given us a lot of information. I really think that we are being taken as a nation through, we're being taken around small circles, and which is why corruption is a threat to our national security. Because if you can have somebody by the name Gedhi or Kavura or Anne Waiguru intimidating one of the most powerful committees of the National Assembly, and then on our way out you offer a cup of tea and you give a pat on the back, bad manners. And you see, you don't even need to be a lawyer like Ndegwa here to appreciate that a central bank has got bare minimums. You cannot carry money in truckloads. And then
brings the conversation back to the banks again.
Yeah, and Dr. Njoroge was probably somewhere at central bank watching this, and nothing has been done. And in another twist, which is really ridiculous, the Director of Public Prosecutions has the guts to write to Dr. Njoroge asking, can I prosecute these people, or is this going to cause instability in the banking sector? And we all know the Constitution says the only person authorized to do these prosecutions is the DPP.
Yeah.
Why would you be asking the governor of Central Bank whether you can go ahead and do prosecutions? I really think, you know...
Well, are Kenyans being taken for a ride here?
I think Kenyans, again, I said sometimes back, they are on their own. The president is on record having said, munataka nifanye nini. So essentially what we're having is that we are having failed and collapsed institutions that cannot deliver what Kenyans mandated them to do. Remember, this is not the first time we are seeing that the committee members have been bribed. Yeah. Anytime, even if it is EICC, anytime they make a move to expound an issue of corruption, the next thing we'd see is that the chairman or the commissioners are being kicked out.
Remember, that's the same thing that happened to Ababuna Mwamba when he was
remember also PLO Lumumba was also kicked out
ESCC,
the same way.
Yes.
Remember this guy called Matemo was also kicked out the other day. Kinisu was kicked out the same way. Now we have this committee still being accused. And then they come and say it's corruption eating corruption. So anytime a committee moves, never mind that we have not seen the report, but we cannot be justified to discredit the report at the moment. But now the report has been discredited by the Murkomen and co.
Even before it's put down on paper.
Even before it's put on paper. Why? Because they do not want that report ever to get to the people. Because they never want people to ever know what happened. If Murkomen is as clean as it claims to be, if his company is as clean as it purports to be, and this I must say within the confinement of the doctrine of confidentiality between a client and an advocate. But when duty calls, and it's a national duty, in matter of fact, a duty that calls and puts your law firm into disrepute, what is difficult with you coming and asking your client whether you can expose such kind of information that will credit your firm and credit the client in issue?
But Ndegwa, what are we saying? Like for the instance of the Public Accounts Committee,
yes.
Are the members clean?
I still cannot say they are, neither I cannot say they are not. For one reason, this country has that tradition of blackmailing any committee and the commissions.
And hounding them out of office.
And hounding them out of office. So to me, going by the past experience, I would think that this is a process of trying to hoodwink them so that they can keep quiet. Look at what the president said the other day. The president said, and I am not against the president, it's for the love of this nation that you have to expound these issues. He said that let's not just look at the negative part of the NYS, the small things, irregularities, but also let's appreciate that NYS has done much for this country.
But when about 1 billion is stolen...
That is not much. You should not even look at that. Don't concentrate on that.
The budget is 2.3 trillion, so what's 1 billion?
Look at what they have been able to do. What you're telling us is we have actually canonized corruption, and we have demonized any person trying to fight corruption. And then that is why Kenyans are then on their own, and we must build up a country that is going to come up with institutions that can breathe life and hope to the Kenyans. The president must also be able to breathe life and hope. Where there is an issue, the president cannot just downplay it the way he is downplaying the issues of NYS. But Gumbo is saying NYS scam touches the high and the mighty. So they are ready to do anything under the sun to make sure that this thing is never expounded and people never get to know what happened. So out of the billions that were stolen, they can come up with a figure of 40 million that has been dished out to the members. They say in Africa, it's bad manners for you to speak with food in your mouth. So they want to tell them, you guys, your food in your mouth, keep quiet.
Keep quiet. Yes. All right, we have 2 minutes. I will let you have the last word on this.
And you know, an interesting thing by Senator Kipchumba Murkomen is asking the members of the park to subject themselves to lifestyle audit and also reveal their accounts, personal and business accounts. And I think that's a very good way to digress from the core issue because the people who are being investigated are not the members of park. It's is the farms dealing with the out-of-the-box and such kind of organizations. So instead of him focusing on the core issue affecting Wanjiku is digressing. But I guess I think at the end of the day, for Kenya to make progress, we need to do two things. Number one, ensure that we enforce Chapter 6 of the Kenyan Constitution. And as we said earlier on, persuade people to respect the 10 commandments as they go through the nominations. And then create very good systems so that it matters not whether it's Dismus or Akisa or Ndegwa is in that office, but you have to operate within that system. Because there's this fallacy that, you create very good systems, they will control people. Kenya's got a very solid constitution. If only people respected the institutions, we'd be in a very good place. So we need very good institutions, and we need to stop bad people from taking office. Now, earlier on in the week, the Attorney General, Githu Muigai, said that we should elect corrupt leaders next time. And I found that statement to be very interesting, because his bosses have been accused of catalyzing corruption in Kenya. So I'm wondering whether he's actually suggesting that he needs to go home, or that was a statement of contradictions.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to end it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in. That was what's taken prominence on the newspapers. We've gone through the Standard newspaper, the Daily Nation, and the Star newspapers on some of the top stories that we had there. And in studio, I had Ndegwa Njiru, who is a lawyer, and of course Dismus Mukwe, political analyst, joining us here on KTN Weekend Express to just take a look at your newspapers. Up next, let's talk about road safety. How safe are you on the roads, especially on this festive season? What are both the government and the private sector doing to ensure you're safe, and some of the challenges that they undergo and recommendations on how you should behave on the road this festive season? We've already seen so many accidents, and we're just halfway through December. So this is a conversation we'll be having just in a bit, but let's take a short break before we get back with that discussion.